Morning, everyone. Hi. So I'm Louise Buckley. I'm the PSR COO. Massive welcome to all of you. I'm so excited. This is our first annual plan event in over 2 years. So it's great to see so many of you here in the room with us, but there's also a number of people who are joining us virtually. Really looking forward. I can see some old faces, so I'm really looking forward to catching up with some of you later and also meeting the new ones. Great to see you all. So before I welcome Aideen, our new interim chair, I'm just going to give you a few housekeeping bits and pieces. So the agenda for today can be found, mine's not on me anymore, I've had to mic up. On the back of your badge, you'll find the agenda for today and also the breakout sessions you've opted for. So have a look at those. Breakout sessions happened after our first comfort break. So you'll be able to find your way through. It's back in this room, actually. It's quite interesting. We have these walls that come up and make this into 3 rooms. It's quite nifty. So we'll be back in this room, so it shouldn't be too hard to find. For today, if you'd like to provide us with any anonymous feedback, there's also a QR code on. We've got so much on the back of your little badge. So there's a QR code there. Please do give us feedback. It's really useful for us to hear about what you think of today, but also anything else you think we might need to do with you. It's really good for us to engage with you, so please do let us know. During lunch and networking, we'll have a team of colleagues that are going to be on hand to answer any questions you've got that we don't get to in this morning's sessions. So please do talk to people. There should be a good lunch, hopefully, to keep us all going. And as I say, lots of people around to talk to you. No scheduled fire alarms today. So if you hear a fire alarm, follow the venue's instructions. Normally I'd say follow us, but we don't know what we're doing in this case either. So follow whatever the venue's telling us. And finally, if you've got any questions throughout the morning, please do go and chat to the PSR team that were on the registration desk from where you came in. Hope you enjoy the event this morning, and I'm looking forward to some really good discussions. And I'm now going to hand over to our interim chair, Aideen Walsh.
Thanks, Louise. Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us this morning. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Aideen Walsh, and I am the interim chair at the PSR. And I'm delighted to welcome you to this very important stakeholder event today. So there's no doubt that payments is an increasingly fast-paced sector with lots of change ahead, as well as dealing with the impacts that the current environment is presenting. Unpredictable geopolitical landscape, and it continues to have a real impact on the wider sector and economy. The whole UK economy relies on the systems that we oversee, and the technology behind them is constantly evolving, responding to and influencing the way people and businesses want to pay and be paid. It's therefore really important for us at the PSR that our work, whether that be business as usual or dealing with new opportunities and challenges, is delivered in a really timely way to reflect the pace at which everything is moving. Our sector intelligence and analysis work will be key here, and that's led by Natalie, who's on the panel. This work develops and deepens our understanding of trends in the payments sector, helping us to get ahead of emerging issues, to inform our decision-making and target our interventions. Engaging with you, our stakeholders, those we regulate, and those who our work impacts is an integral and essential part of what we do. From sharing the latest PSR news, publishing policy documents, to getting out into communities and hearing real-life stories, and also learning then how payments really works for all those different groups. During the pandemic, our engagement shifted to a digital-first approach, and this was really successful for the PSR. However, as COVID disappears, hopefully, and new behaviours and technologies emerge, it's time to really revitalise our stakeholder engagement opportunities with more emphasis on in-person workshops, roundtables and events like today, where we can really listen to you all, maintain existing strong relationships and, very importantly, grow new ones. This is more important than ever as we take forward our work. It's a really exciting time to be working in payments and payments regulation. And with our focus on new areas in the coming year, it's vital that we also continue to work closely with other authorities. We will continue to coordinate our functions and monitor developments in the industry with the other UK financial regulators, the Bank of England, Prudential Regulation Authority, the Financial Conduct Authority, and the Competition and Markets Authority. And our promise to you is that we'll make it really clear who's responsible for what in actually working together to bring things to fruition. Aligning our work helps us share and enhance our knowledge and work more effectively and efficiently, particularly in the areas where we do overlap. I very much look forward to working with them in my role as interim chair, and all of you and all our other stakeholders as we continue our important work. Now I'd like to welcome Chris Hemsley, the PSR's Managing Director, to the stage to give a few words.
Good morning. And just to echo Louise and Aideen's thoughts there, it's absolutely brilliant to be here in person and the opportunity to already meet some new people and have some really interesting conversations. Now, I'm really looking forward to talking to you today about our work plan for 2022-23. But more importantly, this is a great opportunity for us to answer your questions, to discuss, debate and learn and hear your thoughts, especially in those breakout sessions that we'll be coming to. And we're really interested in finding out and hearing what you think we should be doing. Where do you think we should be focusing? What should we be doing going forward? Now, this is really important because as the PSR regulates the payment systems, those payment systems play such a vital role in all of our lives. They help us all to get paid and be paid. It helps us pay for our groceries, our bills, our travel. And as the UK specialist regulator for payment systems, our vision is that those payment systems work well for everybody. Now, on the whole, the UK payment systems work well. We've seen how resilient, convenient and essential they are to everyday life, particularly during the recent COVID pandemic, when many of us had to adapt and rapidly change the way that we paid for things. However, there are a number of issues that we need to address, be it the prevalence of fraud, the risks to fair competition, or the need to upgrade our infrastructure to support the growth of digital payments, while, of course, preserving the needs of those that need to use cash. Now, before I look forward, this is also a really good opportunity to take stock, to reflect on recent progress and where our work has been delivering real improvements. Now, we've prevented tens of millions of pounds of fraud by making our payment systems safer, by using our powers to make sure that more people and more businesses have the added security of the name checking service confirmation of payee. We've also continued with our role in making sure that Link, the cash machine network, meets the needs of people who want and need to access cash. We've also intervened to reduce the risks to delivery of the new payments architecture, the MPA, which is the renewal of the infrastructure sitting behind many account-to-account payments. And we've also announced the completion of two important pieces of enforcement work, one of which put the end to two cartels in the provision of prepaid cards to some of society's most vulnerable. And last year, we concluded that investigation with financial penalties in excess of £33 million. Now, of course, this is just some highlights, but it reflects the hard work and dedication of everyone working at the PSR. Now, looking ahead to our ongoing and our planned work. This is the first annual plan that sits alongside our 5-year strategy, which we published in January of this year. That strategy was informed by extensive engagement with all of you, with our stakeholders. And it sets out what is going well in payments, where there are risks and opportunities, and also what the PSR should do to improve outcomes for people and businesses. And actually, today, you should hear the PSR talking a lot about outcomes, as this is one of the things that the strategy helps us to be clear about. What is it that we are trying to achieve? What do we want payments and payment systems to deliver for people and businesses? In simple terms, what do we want changed? And this is summarised in our strategy with 4 key outcomes. That payment systems meet people's needs, that users are protected, and that there is effective competition, and then finally, that payment systems are efficient and commercially sustainable. We also set out a number of priority areas where we will focus our work, which will help us achieve these outcomes, and we will be talking about those later this morning. The work that we set out in our annual plan supports these priorities. In this way, we can make sure that we use the resources at our disposal in the places where they can have the most impact, where we think they can improve those outcomes the most. There is a lot of work set out in our annual plan, and I'm not going to, probably relieve you, I'm not going to try and summarise it all standing here. But I do want to draw out 2 particular things. Work that is continuing and that remains a significant ongoing focus for the PSR, and then also the work that is new or that is featuring much more prominently. So on that ongoing work, I'll turn first to the issue of payment fraud and protecting victims. We've made great strides in protecting people from payment fraud in the last few years. We've worked with industry to introduce confirmation of payee and the code for reimbursing victims of authorised push payment scams. And there has been a step change in how victims are protected. Literally hundreds of millions of pounds have been reimbursed to victims. But fraud like this is still growing, and there is much more to do. Which is why this year's annual plan includes work to take that next step change in prevention and protection. Last month, we set out plans to make confirmation of payee, the name-checking service, ubiquitous. And I'm delighted that government has confirmed its intention to remove the barriers to the PSR using its powers to more directly tackle payment fraud. So reflecting that, we are now working on a package of reforms to take the next big step, which includes extending minimum standards of protection to all relevant payment firms and making sure that there are sufficient incentives on firms to act against accounts that are controlled by criminals. Second, we continue to oversee Pay.UK's capability and its approach to the renewal of our interbank infrastructure. It is moving to a different phase now as Pay.UK's procurement process progresses, and we will increasingly focus going forward on the regulatory arrangements to protect fair competition. Third, we'll continue in our role regulating Link and protecting people's ability to access cash from a free-to-use ATM. However, the recent government announcements confirm its intention to grant the FCA new powers to oversee the provision of a wider range of cash access services. I welcome this development. In practical terms, and assuming this bill progresses as planned, it means that the PSR will increasingly focus on improving access to digital payments, as is illustrated by the session that we ran earlier this month on the subject of improving access to digital payments. So turning now to the new and growing areas of activity for the PSR. The first that I would like to call out is open banking. I've spoken for some time on the need for open banking to become a business as usual part of the payments ecosystem and to be properly regulated. There are huge opportunities for open banking to unlock better ways of making payments, including giving people more control over their money, which is why I am pleased that we have agreed, working alongside the FCA and agreed with the CMA and government, to set up the Joint Regulators Oversight Committee. This work is now underway as we set up the necessary governance and oversight that will allow us to identify the best way to move from open banking being an important competition remedy to being a fully integrated part of the payment ecosystem. And of course, we will be supporting the FCA as it looks to also realise the opportunities presented by open finance. The second of the new and increased areas of work relates to competition in payments and reflects some of the points that we made in our strategy around the risks that we see to healthy competition. Competition has been and continues to be a significant force for good. It spurs innovation and the delivery of new services that people and businesses want. But payments are changing. Cash is playing a less significant role. Cheques are now in very limited use. And while there has been significant new entry in many parts of payments, this is not the case everywhere. So we are considering what steps we might take to improve the chances that competition in payments is effective going forward. Most obviously by taking a major piece of work forward to explore and make sure that account-to-account payments are able to accommodate a broader set of use cases, notably including retail payments, both in person and online. Now, our goal here is to keep up the pressure on the large card schemes, particularly Visa and MasterCard, so that they have to work hard, including by offering new services keenly priced. This is not about the PSR picking winners, and Visa and MasterCard both offer hugely convenient payment solutions that work well for their customers. But our account-to-account work is instead trying to make sure that tomorrow's winners have to fight hard for their customers and have to win a fair fight to succeed. This also explains our recent announcement on card fees. We have concerns that price increases that we have seen suggest that competition may not be working sufficiently well today. Now, this is a major piece of work that will take some time to complete. So to summarise, the PSR is working to improve outcomes in payments now, trying to change things that matter for people and businesses. And our work in this coming year builds on some of those long-term priorities, notably in payment fraud. But our annual plan also sets out new pieces of work in open banking and in account-to-account payments. And this work is focused on taking action today so that UK payments provide choice, protect people from harm, and support competitive dynamic markets. And reflecting that, I look forward to continuing the work with you all towards these common goals. Thank you very much.
So I do know that we've got a Q&A session now, so that's encouraging, isn't it? And I will make sure someone at the back is going to remind me so I don't keep you from your tea and coffee for too long. Anyway, welcome back. So we've got Natalie Timon as well, who's our Head of Strategy Analysis and Monitoring. And we are going to open the floor to questions in the audience. So if you're in the audience, put your hands up. A roving mic will come round, tell us who you are and where you're from. And also, if you're virtual, please put your question in the chat bar, and one of our staff is going to make sure some of those questions are filtered in. As Chris mentioned earlier anyway, this is the first annual plan that sits alongside our 5-year strategy, which we published in January. And the strategy is designed around the outcomes we want to see in payments. And to achieve the outcomes we want, we set 4 strategic priorities, which some of you may know about and some of you won't. And in a minute, I'm going to hand over to Chris, who's going to quickly run you through those before the questions. But these are the areas where we consider we can see our people, powers, and other resources to have the greatest impact on the UK's payment systems. So just before I go into questions, Chris, perhaps you could run us through what the 4 strategic priorities are, so they're front of mind for all of you. And then I have a couple of questions to kick things off, and then we'll open things up to all of you. Chris.
Yes, so as a reminder, you can see I've got a card. If you want one of these, I have got some. The first is around access and choice, particularly relating here to making sure people have that ability to use a payment system, make payments in a way that works for them. Protection, so when they do use our payment systems, that they are adequately protected. Competition, which I was just talking about. And then also a particular priority area on account-to-account payments. So it's that access and choice, protection, competition, and unlocking account-to-account payments.
Could I just add to that? Is my mic on? Yes. That I don't see the 4 priorities as seeing them separate and in isolation, but they all link together. So most obviously, if you think about competition and unlocking account to account, there are strong links between them. We need to do both in order to get competition off the ground. And similarly, when we think about access and protection, we want, of course, users to have access to the systems and to have the protection to be able to use the systems in order to push the firms providing them to compete stronger, to innovate more. So don't see them in isolation, but as a package.
Yep.
Thank you, Natalie. Chris, I'm going to direct this one at you as well. So what does the strategy tell us about the PSR's regulatory approach and how it's changing?
Well, Aideen, you were talking about it a lot. Is that one of the things that we are trying to do a lot more of is take the opportunity, as we are now allowed to meet in person, face to face, but to just engage more and just to be a bit more confident to engage much more early in our thinking, to test, to check our understanding, and to hear if you've got better ideas than the one we've got, which is probably true, because you're working in the industry and you're closer to what customers actually want and need. So that's, I think, one in terms of the way of working. I want us to be much more kind of open, discursive, engage a lot more and in different ways. I guess the other one that I can pick out is which is sort of repeating some of the stuff that I was just talking about, is we've got that clear strategy. It will need to change and adapt as priorities and what's happening in the market changes. But that, I think you're increasingly going to hear us talking about our strategy, the outcomes that we're trying to work towards. And that, I think, will be, it'll be a lot clearer about what we're trying to achieve. And again, help you to help us to make good progress.
I would just add one thing to that. I think the PSR has come under criticism, probably rightly so, about at times not being as transparent as it could be about the work being done in support of a strategy. So one of the commitments that the PSR has made is basically to update on a regular basis about where in that 5-year strategy it is, where it's having to flex, where there has been feedback gained, what changes have been made as a result of that. So, I hope that, people start to feel that it is, off a good base, but it is more engaged going forward as it delivers on this strategy.
Thanks, Aideen. And just one more question before I hand over to the audience. Natalie, could you talk us through how the strategy is going to be embedded in the day-to-day work of the PSR?
Yes, happy to. So, I think embedding the strategy is really all about ensuring that the actions that we take as a regulator are well aligned with the delivery of our strategic outcomes. And my department, the Strategy Analysis and Monitoring team, will be leading on embedding the strategy with, of course, the support and working very closely with the PSR, but also you, our stakeholders, and other regulators. We're looking to embed the strategy at each stage of the end-to-end life cycle of the work that the PSR does. So what do I mean by that? Well, for instance, I think it means adopting an approach to identifying risks and opportunities, particularly to our strategic outcomes. As we've already said, we need to be flexible. We know that this is a fast-moving industry and things change. We want to be flexible and adapt where necessary, and we need to be able to identify those risks and opportunities. But I think it also means that when we develop policy, when we have enforcement cases, when we publish reports, we're very clear about how the actions that we take fit in with our strategic priorities. And hopefully you will have seen that in the annual plan, which highlights that. And I think we also want to ensure that we have a very good understanding of the impact that our interventions, be them hard or be them soft, actually have. And to that end, I'm very keen, and I know a few of you heard me say, that eventually I would like to do ex post evaluation to really measure the impact of the PSR that we've had. And at the moment, in terms of embedding the strategy, we are working very closely in my division with our policy colleagues to think through, when we're putting in place directions, etc., how are we going to monitor them? How are we collecting the baseline data to ensure in a few years' time, when we can actually look at impact, we can do that ex post evaluation. So quite a broad work plan to embed the strategy, and I think it will involve the entire PSR and stakeholders as well.
And I would just add one thing, Louise, just to what Natalie has said, is the board is always asking when. So recognising that this is a very fast-paced environment for payments, we're asking when and what are the blockers. So, there are certain projects where stakeholders ask, why is it taking so long? So what the PSR will be doing going forward is just being very clear where it can inject pace and where things are being held up, because there has to be a consultation. That feedback has to be taken on board, and then changes need to be made, so that you can be very clear where it is process and the limitations of the process, and pace where pace can happen.
Thank you. So I'm going to open up to the floor now for any questions, and indeed Toby at the chat bar. John Howells from Link. The roving mic's coming your way.
Brilliant. Thank you, Louise. So I've read that there's 10 million people who can't or won't use digital payments, and that's obviously a problem as cash falls away. What can you do to fix the problem with digital inclusion and make digital payments available to all?
Chris?
Yeah, so you're absolutely right. I think possibly quoting our research there actually from 2019. So that's absolutely right. I think, I guess a few things just to unpack that problem, because I think some aspects of it are obviously to do with access to digital, so to data and to technology. So there's that set of problems which are actually sort of society-wide. Within that access to digital issue as well, there is then, it's something about do payments work for people as well? So there's a group of people there who have got a bank account, and we did ask them the question actually in 2019, what happens if you can't use cash? And many can if pushed, but don't want to. So there's a set of problems there where I think PSR might have a particular role in trying to understand how to make and support payments and payment firms to offer solutions that will make payments more convenient, give people more control over their money, give them more visibility of their bank balance, these sorts of things, so that they can understand and budget and almost help people to use digital when they are actually currently able to. There are then still a group of people who, even if we manage to do that brilliantly, there are other underlying issues that we will need to work across the public sector and with industry on. And one is that digital connectivity issue. That's obviously one that we can't on our own solve, and we can't really sort of own and solve on our own, but is at least one where we can explain the payments and the kind of inclusion effects of that wider problem about digital inclusion. And of course, I mentioned it in the speech actually, but in terms of the practical next steps, we had a session, it was earlier this month, wasn't it? It was a couple of weeks ago, where we started a conversation around on the back of the work that the PSR panel, which is the separate statutory panel that advises the PSR, they've published a report under the banner of the Digital Initiative. And we had a really interesting conversation with a whole range of stakeholders around what that report was talking about, other things that people were interested in perhaps weren't in that report. And we're now, our next step are to bring that together and set out our kind of more concrete plans on what we can do to pick off some of the problems that are kind of in our space that we can influence, that where we can kind of lean in and help.
I would just add one thing to that is, there is a huge amount of awareness that there are different types of vulnerabilities and, and different payment solutions for those types of vulnerabilities. So as the follow-up, it's ensuring, if it's mental health, if it's dementia, if it's poverty, to actually consider those different types of vulnerabilities. And as Chris said, it's need cash versus preference for cash. And, the need cash may always stay as a need cash or for the foreseeable future, whereas the preference, that might be the education piece. But we need to be very clear what we're dealing with. And as Chris said, that does involve other organisations. If there is a education journey, that is going to involve some of you in this room and some other agencies out there.
Thank you. Toby, perhaps there's one from the virtual. There's nothing in the virtual world. Okay. Mark Falcon from Zephyr. Nice to see you.
Louise. Yeah, Mark Falcon from Zephyr, also ex-PSR. What do you think are the lessons from the recent collapse of the European Payments Initiative, which had huge support from regulators to bring competition against Visa and MasterCard across the EU?
Yeah, so I think what I sort of prefer to kind of I think one of the lessons for us, or one of the reflections. I don't want to do a kind of compare and contrast thing because that's probably not as useful. But I think to unpack what we're trying to do in the UK with the UK's payment systems is to try and make sure that making more of the potential for competition between payment systems. So over the last 5 or so years, technology has moved on, and business practices have kind of moved on as well, which means that increasingly payments for a particular use case can go on different rails. They can go between different payment systems, and I think that is the future. So it's first that recognition of payment competition between payment systems is much more of a thing. Now, going a bit more to your question, it's then, well, what are we going to do about that? Well, we see there's quite a lot of potential, huge amount of, huge opportunity to unlock account to account as a platform, as a rail that can accommodate a wider set of payments. Now, that isn't building another payment scheme. It's not trying to, we're not trying to deliver an Ask Paid at UK to deliver a kind of retail payments platform that people will kind of be using direct. But it's to make sure that the infrastructure, when it's today and also as it's renewed, the rules that support the use of that infrastructure and then the governance around it all make that platform as open, as flexible and as useful for other firms as it can be, so that they can then deliver a wider range of services across a whole range of things. Now, what that should then achieve is it gives new firms, existing firms, fintechs, the confidence and the kind of understanding that there is a route to market. They can launch new services using this platform. They may choose to use a different one or do it a different way, but it is there. And through that way, we inject competition at that kind of infrastructure, structural level, rather than trying to kind of replicate, because that's not what we're doing. We're not trying to replicate the existing schemes. We want that overlay market in the account-to-account kind of language to be competitive, to encourage new entry. So it's I think, a different kind of emphasis, actually, to the one that's been adopted elsewhere.
Thank you, Chris. Back to the floor.
Thank you. It's Adrian Roberts here from Link. Thank you for the presentation. Really helpful to hear you bring that plan for the year ahead to life. I'm just wondering, what are the kind of 2 or 3 things that industry could do to help with the delivery of this? What are you looking for from industry?
That's a good question.
Can I start?
Let's do one
I'm going to start with
each.
quite a specific example. So many of you know that I am heading up the card fees work that we're doing, and we've got terms of reference out. And I think the most helpful thing from the industry at the moment would be to come to us with evidence on this. Tell us about your concerns, what your response to the terms of reference are, and the evidence that you've got. And we can use that, and we can then push things forward more quickly. That's a very specific example for card fees. There'll be other things, I think, for the other parts of the work plan.
Maybe if I go next, because it actually builds on Natalie's point. When there is a consultation, this is my observation, when there is a consultation, I always ask, well, what does good look like in terms of responses? And I would say there's a huge number of players in this ecosystem. There's a huge number of emerging players, a huge number of stakeholders, but it feels as though it's always the same ones who are responding, and we need to find a better way to get wider responses to the consultations that we're putting out there. But what I would say is if stakeholders feel that there is a better way to engage to get the responses in, let us know. That would be my key ask.
You asked for 3, didn't you? So I'll have to. No, it's fine. No, it's good. I think it's continuing a bit of a theme. So when I'm talking internally in the PSR, one of the things we're trying to is get out there and talk to people. So I guess there's the other side of that, isn't there? Is that if you want to engage with us but you're struggling, just use the email address. I think it's from the QR code. We'll give you a way in. So because we are that diversity of views, and we do want to have those conversations. And I guess making it a bit more specific. I mean, Natty's talked about one very specific one, but two more. We've just been talking about digital. We haven't got the solutions, and we're not going to have all the right ideas, and that's not how this works. So if there are people out there that as we're going through this process or sitting there today, have got a great idea that they think they need our help, or they don't quite know what to do, or they know regulation might be in this space, reach out and talk to us. Another one that's in that space, which is definitely coming up, which I talked about, is fraud. It's going to require a huge range of people to come forward with ideas, suggestions, ways of kind of developing this over time. We've been spending quite a lot of time talking to quite a few people, but we haven't talked to everyone. We it just won't have happened. And we will be setting out in September what we think is the next step on fraud prevention. But what do you all think? Does that sound right? Do you think it's going to work? Have you got a better idea? Because there's a great opportunity now in the period before the legislation takes effect, where we can really work this problem and see if we can kind of take that, take a really ambitious step forward. So, bit of a theme, but slightly different versions of it.
Can I add one thing to that? So you're going to get four. We've spoken about sort of more formal responses to consultations and when we've put something out, but actually, particularly in my role, when we're thinking about the new risks and opportunities that we haven't spotted, please just proactively come to us. If you're spotting something happening, a new trend, something that you think isn't on our radar, please tell us.
Yeah.
Thank you, Adrian. Fiona. I'm going to stop saying people's names. Sorry.
No problem.
Particularly as I would have got that one wrong because it's a different person.
Adam Gagan from Revolut. Thanks again, Chris. That's, I think, a fantastic vision and a plan I think most of us in this room fully support. My question is, to some extent, over priorities. The technology we see around the world that's going to drive change is, again, primarily account-to-account instant payments, and then also, to some extent, CBDCs and potentially stable coins, at least when they're genuinely stable. We obviously hear messages from the Treasury on making the UK a hub. Yep. Over the next sort of 5 years, which of those two do you think the industry in the UK should invest time in building? Because doing both is a challenge, and the timelines potentially may overlap. Thanks.
Wow. Okay, so I'm just going to be really honest. I'm not going to answer your direct question because regulators picking winners is going to be a bit of a dangerous one. But okay, I'll try and add a bit of kind of colour at least. So we are. I mean, the first thing is we are engaged in this space. It didn't sort of make the cut of the speech, but we are, and I attend the crypto asset task force. So we are in this space, and generally, if I give you kind of a slightly simplified perspective of this, is that we see that there could be huge opportunities here. It's a new technology, or two different sort of variations on different technology, and it has the potential to be a kind of new entrant, solve some problems, and could become another payment system if I kind of get a bit more regulatory about it. So we are doing the work to make sure that the legislation fits. It's not too bad, but for us, but that it fits. The FCA and PRA, and bank are all doing the same, so that we've got that benefit of the current framework that we've got. That I think the thing that I think is hugely valuable with the Bank of England focusing on issues around resilience, financial stability, PSR particularly focused on kind of competition, innovation, and protecting business and people's interests, and to kind of use that framework in the as crypto CDBC kind of goes forward. CDBC is, I think, is in a little bit of a different place for us in terms of focus, because there's a clue in the initials which I always get slightly wrong, but I think I got it right that time, didn't I?
No.
The central. Did I get it wrong? Oh, sorry. Central bank. I was going to say the central bank bit, which I've messed up. Sorry. CBDC. Yes. So that central bank bit does mean that the Bank of England is clearly pushing this aspect forward and thinking about it. I guess a final observation, and apologies. I I'm not giving you a kind of answer to your question directly, but is that sorry, I had a final question. I've now forgotten what I was going to say.
Could I just
Yeah,
say
yeah, why
something
don't you
while
rescue
you're
me?
thinking? So probably just to be very direct, and you can see it in the plan, an absolute focus of the board and the PSR is to get the MPA delivered.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I'll leave it at that.
Yeah.
Thank you, Adam. There's a gentleman here with his hand up.
Good morning, Stuart Bailey, Lloyds Banking Group. One of the things I haven't heard this morning is any discussion of digital identity, which I think will be important to address many of the themes. Digital identity will provide access to services for the excluded. It will be important in preventing fraud, and it'll be critical for the new services such as digital currencies that we've just discussed. I'd be interested in the PSR's views of digital identity in the payments use case.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Do you want me to, so I think so. There is some pretty broad questions around identity, digital identity, which are kind of properly for government. But there, as you framed in the question, there are some within payments. I think the place where we are probably going to be most obviously kind of engaged in this is probably through the open banking because I think it's still early days. We're kind of still in that transition from the CMA into the PSR FCA joint working, but I think that is probably one of the most obvious places where the issues of identity, using open banking to support it and vice versa, that's probably the home. But a good challenge of is that the right approach? So maybe that's one to pick up in discussion. But I think that's where it's probably most likely to come up. So yes, we are there, but it's and as we kind of set that work plan out, I think it's probably may well be one of the steps in there, I would imagine.
And maybe, Stuart, to give you some comfort, whilst it hasn't come out in Chris's speech this morning, it is absolutely something that is coming up time and time again in conversations internally.
Thank you, Stuart. I'm conscious there are a couple of hands up, but I don't want to forget our virtual attendees, just in case we've had none. So we can go back to our people that are in person.
Thank you, Louise. Paul Rogers, Vendercom. Just one thing I was going to say, trying to remember CBDC, just remember cannabis derivatives, CBDs. That's the best place to start. We haven't, unless I missed something and fell asleep, we haven't heard the B word used. Brexit, international interoperability of payments is absolutely essential. I think all of us are recognizing that we're moving into a really difficult time for the economy. We've been in a difficult time. Rebuilding that economy, making sure that our retailers, particularly all payment acceptors, are going to be able to operate on the international stage. What work is PSR doing with its counterparts in that economic regulator world across the rest of the world, not even just in Europe?
Yeah, so we actually do meet and learn quite a lot. So I met some representatives from Australia actually, I'm going to say 2 weeks ago. It was quite recently. Really good to kind of have those sort of conversations. And I certainly left that meeting learning lots of useful things. So it is something we do, and engaging across Europe and also with in North America actually we do quite a bit actually. Yeah, Canada. I think that international. If I try and get a bit more concrete on kind of where does that international piece kind of fit in the plan, I think obviously the ISO 20022 is a big part of that. So that is kind of square in the MPA territory. So that's a key enabler that is firmly kind of within our patch in terms of the regulatory sphere. I think the other one is that there is a bit where we are kind of supporting, but let's be clear, the Bank of England are in the lead, which is exploring the international payments and that kind of core interoperability piece. So that is actually a good example, and Ada, you were talking about that kind of joint working where, given the bank's kind of international and its historical role in those sorts of areas where we're playing a very supporting role, and I don't want to overclaim because they're doing the work and we're sort of very much kind of just making sure, kind of keeping in touch with them as they do it. So making sure that what they're doing then links back into the UK payment systems. But yeah, so that hopefully that gives you a bit of a sense. I mean, it's not an area in the plan. Yeah, we do spend a lot of time learning from others. It isn't an area in the plan where we've got a lot of resource focus, partly because the bank has.
I think particularly because of the interchange fee, interrelationships and things like that. There are so many things in that outer end, the merchant end.
Oh yeah, so I mean, of course, as we I'll kind of play that back to make sure particularly those online are heard. Around the kind of the linkages around fee structures and the interchange fee in particular, that clearly is an area where we're not looking at the UK market in isolation. And obviously, one of the things we confirmed in the terms of reference recently was that it was those international fees was one element of the two areas of focus.
Yeah. And just on that, as part of the card fees work, and much more broadly, as Chris said, we do speak with a lot of international competition authorities. I mean, I could name check quite a few, but I won't do that now. But definitely, specifically for card fees and interchange fees and scheme fees, etc. But also more broadly, how they're going about regulating and what lessons we can learn.
Thank you, Paul. We've got 5 minutes left for questions. There's a gentleman that's been waiting patiently over here, and then we might have time for one more. Let's see how long an answer we get.
Hello, Andrew Wilkie from Baringa Partners. So what we're seeing at a kind of an industry cross-sector level with our clients is a significant focus on tackling climate change, sustainability, and kind of the transition to net zero. How do you see the role of payments and the PSR in supporting some of these challenges?
So in our strategy, we did talk about the climate change. I've spent quite a bit of my career working in this area. It's something I care deeply about. But so we have thought about what value can the PSR add in this space, and there no doubt are some things that we could do to facilitate others to do things. But it's probably I'm tempted to throw back the question to you, though, which is probably a bit unfair. But it isn't an area where we've got a lot of resource focused on, and I'm aware, other regulators are. We did think about it. It is something, in terms of relative priorities. But it's not because we don't care. It's just that if we think about what can we do in this space. Now, I have had conversations with a number of payment firms who are, starting that journey in part of the kind of corporate social responsibility, environmental transparency. They, what is their kind of carbon footprint for different payment technologies, and of course, very aware of the fact that many of the large scale kind of crypto currencies are really bad for the environment, frankly, and the digital payments that we've mainstreamed, digital payments, cash, seem to be a much better option if you're worried about climate change. But it's not, to be really clear and transparent, it's not an area where we've identified that there's a lot of that kind of outcome and impact that we can have. If we've missed something, do let us know, because we've tried to, in our strategy, be clear about what we're not doing as well as what we are. But it's not through the fact that I don't care, because I spent a lot of time in that area.
Thank you, Andrew. We've probably got time for one more question.
Hi, I'm Kirsten Smart, Lloyds Banking Group. Chris, I'm really interested in what you were saying about the MPA and Pay.UK, and perhaps Pay.UK not operating as a scheme in the way that the card schemes do. But it's perhaps not one of the issues with Pay.UK and the MPA at the moment, that actually we need them to operate more as a scheme. We need to see those economic models and those liability models.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so let me unpack that, because it's what I was certainly getting is not to get Pay.UK to try and be Visa or MasterCard. But absolutely, I do want Pay.UK, and I think we hopefully have set this out in writing, to be a much more kind of active manager of the rule book, to be more proactive in terms of seeing that there's issues and gaps, and how can the rules, governance, technology kind of solve that problem. And I think that is a bit of a shift. I think they are making that shift, and it's in their strategy. So this isn't an area of disagreement, I think, with Pay.UK. There is that broad agreement that they need to be moving in that direction. So they do need to be thinking about the commercial model for these payments, understanding where they can add value by delivering that important coordinating function to facilitate others to deliver, or where there's actually things they just need to deliver centrally because the kind of market, the overlay market future won't do it. So it is, in terms of I guess there's a bit of a spectrum here, isn't there? Is that they need to be much more kind of active and playing that coordinating role, but it's not high street name kind of advertising, kind of the Visa, MasterCard, Amex will do. It's definitely more than they do today, solving those problems, those coordination things, but more to unlock others to deliver the services rather than delivering them completely end to end. Hopefully that kind of helps, because you're right to pick me up on that. That's not what I meant.
Thank you, Kirsty. So we've now got a 20-minute break back outside in the Galleria. Thank you everyone for listening, and for those of you that asked questions. If you go out to the Galleria, we'll let you know around 10:15 people will start saying, can you come back into the room, and we'll direct you to your breakout groups. Hopefully the crash I heard earlier wasn't our crockery. So enjoy your tea and coffee, and we'll see you back in here at 10:15. Thank you everyone.